A new path chosen. The decision lingered in Ethan's mind as he stood by his window, watching the city's nightlights dance below him. The quiet hum of his apartment felt almost too silent tonight, too empty, like it was waiting for something more. He could hear Marla's words echoing, her tone pleading and hopeful. They're beautiful girls, but no one's given them a real chance. Ethan took a deep breath, rubbing his temples as he remembered the photo Marla had shown him. 4 young girls, Jasmine, Faith, Amara, and Leela, all with bright eyes and cautious smiles, their faces a blend of innocence and wariness. He saw in them not only 4 children, but a chance for something he'd never considered before. Family. The idea had come as suddenly as it was daunting. He was a bachelor with a steady, if unspectacular, job in finance. His apartment was small, just big enough for one. He barely knew how to care for himself most days, let alone 4 children. Yet, as the night wore on, the initial shock softened into something else, a determination, a quiet conviction. Ethan wasn't a man who made impulsive decisions, but there was something about this opportunity that felt right, like a key fitting into a long-forgotten lock. The following morning, as the sun pierced through the gray city skyline, Ethan found himself pacing outside the outreach center. His mind was a cacophony of questions and doubts. Would he be enough for these girls? How could he make up for the years of instability they'd faced? What if he failed? Just as he was about to turn back, Marla appeared at the door, waving him inside. She must have sensed his nerves because she gave him a firm pat on the shoulder and led him through the quiet halls. "They're waiting for you," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "Take your time. Get to know them." In a small room filled with toys, books, and colorful posters on the walls, Ethan saw them. 4 small figures, each with her own little personality shining through in the way she sat, fidgeted, or glanced his way. Jasmine, the oldest at 9, sat protectively in front of her sisters, her chin lifted and her gaze steady as if she were assessing him, determining if he was worthy. Faith, a year younger, was more reserved, her arms wrapped around her knees, eyes cast downward but stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Amara, the quiet and observant 7-year-old, seemed to be the watcher, her small, dark eyes missing nothing. And finally, there was Leela, the youngest, just 5, who sat with her head slightly cocked, studying him with a curiosity he couldn't help but smile at. Ethan took a steadying breath and knelt down to their level, introducing himself simply. "Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm here because, well, I'd like to get to know you all." The words felt inadequate, but they seemed to be enough to break the ice, at least a little. Jasmine straightened, her gaze softening ever so slightly. "What do you do?" she asked, her tone challenging but curious. Ethan laughed softly. "I work with numbers all day. Boring, right?" To his surprise, Amara giggled, a small, shy sound, but it was enough to encourage him. He pulled out a little game he'd brought along, one that required some teamwork and communication. The girls were hesitant at first, but as they warmed to him and to each other, they started laughing, collaborating, and finding reasons to smile. It was the beginning of something that felt oddly like belonging. For the next several weeks, Ethan visited the girls every chance he got. He brought them books, told them stories, played games with them, and most importantly, he listened. Each time he learned something new about them. The way Jasmine took on the role of little mom, keeping everyone in line with a fierce loyalty. How Faith loved drawing and would disappear into her own world whenever she had a pencil in hand. Amara's love for animals and her fascination with the stray cats outside the outreach center, and Leela's giggles that could light up the whole room. The social workers noticed the bond forming. They saw the way Ethan showed up every time, without fail. And so, after extensive background checks, financial assessments, and interviews, he was given the green light. The day the girls moved in was a whirlwind of emotions. Ethan had spent hours preparing the small two-bedroom apartment to be a welcoming space, complete with bunk beds, brightly colored blankets, and little notes on their new bedroom door that read, "Welcome home." His friends had laughed when he told them what he was doing, some of them outright questioning his sanity. 4 kids, Ethan. Alone? You know, that's practically impossible, one had said with a smirk, but he'd let their comments roll off his back. This was his decision. His heart had already made up its mind. The first night was awkward and filled with moments of quiet. The girls were cautious, uncertain of this strange new home, with its strange new rules and routines. But as they settled in, Ethan noticed small things that gave him hope. Leela had found her way to the stuffed animal he'd left on her bed and was already asleep, clutching it tightly. Amara, who'd been so shy at first, whispered a soft good night before retreating to her bunk. Faith had taken over the little desk in their room, sketching something quietly as Jasmine read to her younger sisters. In the silence that followed, Ethan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just an act of charity, nor was it some fleeting impulse. These girls were his family now, and he would do everything he could to give them the life they deserved. The weeks that followed were a flurry of activity as Ethan adjusted to the rhythms of parenting 4 lively, intelligent girls. Each day came with its own set of challenges: school lunches, hair braiding sessions that took far longer than he'd anticipated, helping with homework, and getting used to the noise that now filled his once quiet apartment. The neighbors had begun to look at him differently, some of them with approving nods, others with whispered criticisms. He'd catch snippets of conversations, phrases like, "What's a man like him doing with those girls?" and "It's a shame. He could have had such a bright future." But every time he felt the sting of those words, he looked to his daughters and remembered the commitment he'd made. He discovered that raising 4 children alone was a constant balancing act. He made mistakes, forgetting important dates, burning a few dinners, struggling with bedtime routines. But there were moments of grace, too. Moments when Jasmine would come over to him after everyone else had fallen asleep, telling him quietly, "You're doing a good job, Ethan. We're happy here." Or when Faith would leave him little drawings on his desk, images of their new family that she sketched with pride. The girls began to trust him, little by little. One night, as they all crowded on the couch watching a movie, Amara rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes closing with exhaustion. Ethan felt his heart swell, realizing that he'd crossed some invisible threshold. They trusted him. They felt safe. As time passed, Ethan's friends began to see the impact this new family had on him. He was happier, more grounded, and more purpose-driven. His world had become something more than work and quiet evenings. His days were filled with laughter, late-night talks, and the endless tasks that came with fatherhood. In those early mornings when he'd wake to the sight of 4 peaceful faces sleeping soundly, he knew he'd made the right choice. By the end of that first year, it was clear to everyone who saw them together that this wasn't just some charitable experiment. It was a real, lasting family, built on the strongest foundation possible: love, patience, and resilience, the struggles we share. The newness of family life came with both beautiful and bruising realities. Ethan's apartment, which had once seemed spacious for one person, was now filled to the brim with school bags, shoes, toys, and a constant chorus of laughter and bickering. Each day felt like a tightrope walk between exhaustion and joy, between teaching the girls rules and learning how to bend them himself. Morning routines became a dance of quick breakfasts, ponytails, and mismatched socks. Ethan often found himself juggling cereal bowls and homework assignments while reminding the girls not to forget their lunch bags. Despite his best efforts, things rarely went as planned. There was always a missing shoe, or someone insisting on last-minute adjustments to her hair, or an argument over whose turn it was to sit in the front seat. Ethan's coworkers were quick to notice his change in demeanor. Eyes a bit bleary, always with a backpack or lunchbox forgotten in his car. But he wore his weariness with pride. Then there were the inevitable moments of conflict, of expectations clashing with reality. As the oldest, Jasmine often tried to act like a second parent, scolding her sisters whenever they misbehaved, or urging Ethan to be more strict when it came to rules. "Dad," she said one night as they washed dishes together, her small hands scrubbing the plates with the precision of someone far older than her 9 years. "You let them get away with too much." Ethan chuckled, wiping down the counters. "And who's the they you're talking about, Missy?" "Faith and Amara especially," she replied seriously. "They need more rules, or they'll think they can do anything. You're supposed to be in charge." Her eyes held a mixture of concern and pride, a fierce sense of duty. Ethan realized then that Jasmine was navigating her own struggles, trying to balance her role as a sister with the sense of responsibility she felt toward her family. "Jasmine," he said softly, kneeling down beside her, "you don't have to take care of everything. That's my job now. You just need to be you. Enjoy being a kid." Jasmine's shoulders softened slightly, but Ethan could see the tension still lingering. She was trying so hard to protect them all, to keep things steady in a world that had shown her little stability. In that moment, he made a promise to himself. He'd make sure she could have a childhood again, to laugh and play without the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. But Jasmine wasn't the only one with struggles. Faith, with her artistic spirit, often lost herself in her drawings. She'd sit for hours, pencil in hand, sketching worlds only she could see. Ethan loved watching her work, marveling at her imagination, but he couldn't help noticing the look in her eyes sometimes, a distant, guarded expression that spoke of memories she hadn't shared. One rainy afternoon, as they all sat in the cozy corner of their living room, Faith handed Ethan a drawing she'd been working on. The picture showed a small figure standing alone on a hill, surrounded by dark clouds. Ethan studied it, feeling a pang of worry in his chest. "Is this you, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Faith shrugged, her gaze fixed on the carpet. "Sometimes." Ethan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You know, Faith, it's okay to feel alone sometimes, but you're not alone anymore. We're all here for you." Faith nodded, a small smile breaking through, but Ethan sensed that it would take time for her to fully open up. He wondered about the life she'd had before, the things she'd seen and felt, and he wished he could make all those shadows disappear. But he knew he could only do so much. He'd have to be patient, let her open up at her own pace. Amara, the quiet, observant one, had her own challenges. She was sensitive to the smallest changes, picking up on moods and emotions like they were colors in the air. Ethan noticed that she was always the first to sense when he was tired or stressed, often placing her small hand on his arm, a silent gesture of support. "Are you okay, Dad?" she'd ask, her big eyes filled with worry. Ethan would smile, ruffling her hair. "I'm great, Amara. Better than ever." But he wasn't always sure he was telling the truth. Parenting 4 girls on his own was far more challenging than he'd imagined, and while he wouldn't trade it for the world, the weight of responsibility sometimes felt overwhelming. Each night, after he'd finally tucked them into bed and the apartment grew quiet, he'd sit alone, thinking about bills, school, groceries, and the countless small worries that came with raising a family. Then there was Leela, the youngest, with her boundless energy and fearless spirit. She was always the first to run headlong into trouble, her curiosity a force of nature. Ethan had lost count of the times he found her perched on the countertop or rummaging through his tools, her eyes sparkling with mischief. One afternoon, Ethan came home to find Leela proudly holding up a makeshift potion she'd concocted with shampoo, dish soap, and glitter she'd scavenged from Faith's art supplies. "Look, Dad," she cried excitedly. "It's magic potion. I'm gonna make us all fly." Ethan's laughter filled the apartment as he gently took the potion from her hands, setting it aside with a chuckle. "Maybe let's save the flying lessons for later, okay?" Through the small challenges and shared laughs, Ethan and the girls were slowly building a rhythm together. But just as they began to settle into their new lives, the world outside their little sanctuary began to intrude. The girls had started school a few weeks after moving in with Ethan, and while they'd adjusted remarkably well to their classes, it wasn't long before the whispers started. At the parent-teacher conference, Ethan noticed the stares from other parents, the way their conversations paused as he walked by with the girls in tow. He could hear the low murmur of their voices, comments he was never meant to hear, but that reached his ears all the same. Did you hear? He adopted 4 of them, all at once. Alone. A single man raising 4 black girls. It's unusual, don't you think? Poor guy must be out of his mind. Doesn't he realize what a burden that must be? The words stung, but he forced himself to keep walking, his head held high. Yet he couldn't ignore the hurt he saw in Jasmine's eyes, the way Faith and Amara glanced at each other uneasily. Layla, thankfully, seemed blissfully unaware, but Ethan knew the others understood more than they let on. One day, as they sat together over dinner, Jasmine finally spoke up, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "Dad, why do people think we're a burden?" Ethan paused, feeling his heart ache at the question. He set down his fork, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. People sometimes judge what they don't understand, Jasmine. They might think it's strange or unusual because they've never known a family like ours. But we're happy, Amara added, her small voice breaking the silence. Aren't we, Dad? Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. We're more than happy, Amara. We're a family, and that's what matters most. The girls nodded, comforted by his words, but Ethan could see that some part of them still held on to the hurt. He wished he could shield them from every cruel comment, every sideways glance, but he knew that wasn't possible. All he could do was show them, day by day, that their family was just as strong, just as loving as any other. Over the next few weeks, Ethan made a point to show his daughters what family truly meant. They spent weekends exploring parks, having picnics, and going on little adventures around the city. He taught them how to ride bikes, helped Faith with her art projects, listened to Jasmine's dreams of becoming a doctor, and cheered Amara on during her school presentations. With Leela, he simply kept up with her boundless curiosity, always on the lookout for her next invention. It was during one of these family outings, at a local park, that a woman approached him, her face radiating kindness and curiosity. She introduced herself as Mrs. Hamilton, a retired teacher who lived nearby. After a bit of small talk, she looked at the girls, her smile widening. "They're wonderful, you know," she said, her voice soft but steady. "They're going to do amazing things one day. I can see it." Ethan felt a lump in his throat, nodding gratefully. "Thank you. They mean everything to me." Mrs. Hamilton leaned in, her eyes twinkling. "Never mind the folks who judge, dear. They don't understand. Keep going, and show them what love can do." As they walked home that evening, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet determination that outweighed all his doubts and insecurities. He knew there would be challenges ahead, that the road he'd chosen wouldn't be easy. But with each step, with every laugh and every tear, he knew he was building something real, something lasting. He glanced down at his daughters, their faces lit by the soft glow of the streetlights. They were his world now, and he was theirs. And as long as he had them, he knew he could face anything that came their way, growing together against the odds. With every passing day, the bond between Ethan and his daughters deepened. As they fell into a rhythm, small habits and routines took root. Jasmine's responsible nature made her the kitchen helper, learning how to chop vegetables and stir pots under Ethan's guidance. Faith became the family's resident artist, covering the fridge with her drawings, pictures of them all as superheroes, with Ethan always leading the team. Amara was the peacemaker, smoothing over disputes and soothing hurt feelings. And Leela, the youngest, was the spark of energy in the house, always asking questions and constantly exploring. Even as they found a sense of belonging within their home, challenges lingered outside it. Though the girls had settled into school, they still faced stares, whispered comments, and the occasional, uncomfortable questions from classmates. Ethan did his best to equip them with strength and resilience, but he also realized that he couldn't protect them from everything. What he could do was make sure that, no matter what happened during the day, they'd come home to a place where they were seen, loved, and understood. One evening, Jasmine came home visibly upset. She dropped her backpack by the door, her face pale and her lips pressed tight. Ethan noticed immediately and knelt to meet her eye level. "Hey, Jazzy, what's going on? Did something happen at school?" he asked gently, his heart clenching with concern. Jasmine hesitated, then shrugged, crossing her arms defensively. Some girls were saying things, stupid things. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. "Do you want to talk about it? They were just wondering why you look different from us." She took a deep breath, her voice shaking slightly. "They said that you can't be our real dad because we don't match." Ethan swallowed, feeling a pang of sadness, but also a swell of determination. He drew her into a hug, stroking her hair softly. "Family isn't about matching, Jasmine. It's about the love we have for each other. I may not look like you on the outside, but you're my daughter, and that's all that matters." Jasmine hugged him tightly, her face buried in his shoulder. "I know, Dad. I just wish they knew that too." Ethan felt the weight of her words. It was hard enough to be a kid without feeling different, to face the assumptions and prejudices of others. He wished he could make it easier for her, for all of them. But he knew he couldn't control the way people saw them. He could only show his daughters the truth by how he loved them, every single day. The next morning, after a sleepless night of thoughts, Ethan arrived at the school. He'd scheduled a meeting with the principal, Mr. Hayes, to address some of the comments the girls were facing. Mr. Hayes, a tall, no-nonsense man with a kind smile, listened attentively as Ethan explained the situation. "Thank you for coming forward about this, Mr. Davis," Mr. Hayes said, nodding sympathetically. "The girls are wonderful students. I'll make sure our teachers are more aware of what they might be facing and encourage them to foster an inclusive environment. I'll also talk to the students about respect and understanding." Ethan felt a wave of relief. It was a small step, but it was something. He left the office feeling hopeful, determined to keep standing up for his girls, to help them navigate a world that sometimes felt too quick to judge. Back at home, the girls were busy preparing for their first family celebration, Leela's 6th birthday. The little apartment buzzed with excitement as they planned a party filled with all of Leela's favorite things: chocolate cake, colorful balloons, and a pile of art supplies Ethan had saved up to buy. The girls pitched in, decorating the living room with handmade banners and helping Ethan bake a towering chocolate cake, a somewhat lopsided but lovingly crafted masterpiece. That evening, as they gathered around the table to sing to Leela, Ethan couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with gratitude. The look on Leela's face as she blew out her candles, her cheeks pink with excitement, was a reminder of everything he had hoped for when he'd taken on the challenge of being their dad. He'd wanted to give them safety, joy, and a sense of belonging. And at least in moments like this, he felt like he was succeeding. After the birthday dinner, the girls presented Ethan with a handmade thank you card. It was covered in colorful doodles and tiny, heartfelt messages from each of them. Jasmine had written in careful, looping letters, "Thank you for being the best dad we could ask for." Faith had added a drawing of the whole family standing under a rainbow. Amara, ever the peacemaker, had written simply, "Thank you for making us all feel safe." And Leela, her spelling slightly shaky, had scrawled, "Thank you for loving us so much." Ethan's eyes misted over as he read their words. He hadn't known that something as simple as a handmade card could mean so much, but it was everything, a testament to the love that had grown between them, despite all the odds. But as with every high, life seemed to balance it with a challenge. One afternoon, a letter arrived, marked with the unmistakable logo of the city's housing authority. Ethan's stomach twisted as he read it, his heart sinking. Due to renovation plans, their apartment building was scheduled to be vacated in a month. Ethan had no idea how they'd find another place on such short notice, let alone one affordable enough for their budget. But he knew he had to try. The search for a new home was grueling. Every apartment he visited was either far beyond his budget or too small for a family of 5. He spent hours after work scrolling through rental listings, his spirits dimming with each "no vacancy" or "sorry, not available." One evening, as he sat at the kitchen table, exhausted and disheartened, Amara quietly approached him. She placed her small hand on his arm, her eyes filled with understanding. "Are we going to be okay, Dad?" she asked softly, sensing his worry. Ethan forced a smile, wrapping an arm around her. "Of course we are, sweetheart. I promise I'll find us a place. We're going to stay together, no matter what." But as the days ticked by, that promise became harder to keep. The girls began packing up their things, a bittersweet process that made each of them realize how much this little apartment had become home. Lila clung to her favorite stuffed animal, as if it could somehow keep them grounded. Jasmine stayed strong, as always, but Ethan noticed the worry lines in her forehead, the way she held her younger sisters a little closer at night. Then, just when hope seemed out of reach, a miracle arrived. Mrs. Hamilton, the elderly woman from the park, had heard about Ethan's predicament. She called him one evening with a surprising offer. "Ethan," she said in her warm, grandmotherly tone, "I have a friend who owns a small rental property not far from the school. It's been vacant for a while, and he'd be happy to rent it to you at a discount. It's a little fixer-upper, but I thought it might be perfect for you and the girls." Ethan's heart soared. The next morning, he met with Mrs. Hamilton's friend, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Watkins, who handed him the keys to a cozy 2-story house. The walls were a little worn, and the floors creaked underfoot, but it had everything they needed. Enough bedrooms for everyone, a small backyard, and a warmth that instantly felt like home. The girls were ecstatic when Ethan brought them to see the place. They ran through the rooms, each claiming her own corner of the house. Faith immediately began imagining how she'd decorate her walls with her artwork, while Amara picked out a little nook by a window where she could read her books. Jasmine, ever the caretaker, pointed out where they'd put the furniture and helped Ethan list out repairs they'd need to make. Lila just ran around in circles, her excitement infectious. As they stood together in their new home, Ethan felt a profound sense of relief. He'd done it. He'd found them a place to live, a home they could call their own. The following days were filled with unpacking, painting, and fixing up their new home. Neighbors dropped by to introduce themselves, and even a few kids from the girls' school stopped over, curious about the new family on the block. Slowly but surely, they'd made the house theirs, filling it with laughter, memories, and the love that had brought them together in the first place. One evening, as they sat around the kitchen table, enjoying a meal they'd cooked together, Ethan looked at each of his daughters and realized just how much they'd changed his life. They weren't just the girls he'd adopted anymore. They were his family, his reason for pushing forward, his source of pride and joy. As they finished dinner, Faith handed Ethan a small picture she'd drawn of their new house. Above it, she'd written in bright, colorful letters, "Home is where we're all together." Ethan felt his heart swell, the words resonating with a truth he'd come to know intimately. "Thank you, girls," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for believing in me, even when things got tough." Jasmine reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "We're a family, Dad, and families stick together." And in that moment, Ethan knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, because they weren't just a family by choice. They were a family by heart. Facing the outside world. Their new home quickly became a sanctuary, a place where Ethan and the girls could laugh freely, decorate to their heart's content, and embrace the small comforts of family life. But as the girls grew older, each began to experience the complexities of their surroundings in new, sometimes painful ways. Outside of the warm walls of home, the world was not always as accepting. Jasmine, now 12 and in middle school, became acutely aware of the subtle and overt ways people judged their family. It wasn't just the comments from classmates or curious glances from teachers, but also the moments when she'd hear phrases like, "You're so lucky he took you in," or "How does he manage with all of you?" Often, these words were spoken by adults who thought they were out of earshot. Jasmine tried to shrug it off, but it became harder to do so. It wasn't just about being seen as different anymore. It was about feeling like she had to prove she belonged, that she and her sisters were more than just lucky. One day, after overhearing a teacher make an offhand comment about not expecting much from them, Jasmine came home, her face tense, and her shoulders squared as if ready for a fight. "Dad, why do people think we're a problem to be solved?" she demanded, her voice sharp with frustration. "It's like they think we're a burden just because you adopted us." Ethan looked at her, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. He knew he'd never be able to change every mind or dispel every prejudice, but he could show Jasmine that her worth was undeniable, that no comment or sideways glance could define her. "Jasmine," he said, his voice steady, "sometimes people have small minds and even smaller hearts. They're afraid of what they don't understand. But you—" He placed a hand on her shoulder, looking directly into her determined gaze. "You're stronger and braver than any of them could ever imagine. Don't let their doubts steal your confidence. Hold your head high, because you're worth 1,000,000 times more than their opinions." His words seemed to sink in, but Jasmine's face remained troubled. He knew it would take time for her to truly believe it, to let those words fill the cracks of her self-doubt. For now, he held her in a tight hug, reassuring her of the love and pride he felt for her. Meanwhile, Faith faced a different challenge altogether. Known for her quiet, artistic nature, she often retreated into her sketches, losing herself in scenes of magical forests, starry night skies, and imaginary worlds filled with colorful characters. While her teachers admired her creativity, she began to struggle academically. Math and science seemed like foreign languages to her, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't keep up with the pace of her classes. One evening, Ethan sat with Faith at the kitchen table, trying to help her with her homework. Her frustration was palpable, her eraser worn down from pressing too hard, her eyes tearing up as she struggled through another problem. "I'm just not smart, Dad," she muttered, pushing the paper away in defeat. "Why do I have to learn all this anyway? It's not like I'll ever use it." Ethan took her hand gently, rubbing her knuckles with his thumb. "You know, Faith, being smart doesn't mean being perfect at everything. You have a gift that most people could only dream of. You see things in a way that no one else does. And sometimes, yes, you have to work harder at certain things, but that doesn't mean you aren't smart." Faith sniffed, her gaze fixed on the paper in front of her. "But the kids at school, they call me stupid when I don't understand things right away." Ethan's heart twisted, knowing how deeply Faith felt things, how vulnerable she was to others' opinions. He pulled a small sketchbook from his pocket, one he'd kept since her last birthday. Inside were all the little drawings she'd given him, scenes filled with life and beauty, pieces of her that she'd entrusted to him. "Look at this," he said, flipping through the pages. "These drawings are yours. They're powerful, Faith. They're part of who you are. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not smart or talented, because you are. This." He pointed at a sketch of a phoenix rising from the flames. "This is you. You're resilient, and no one can take that away." Faith leaned against him, her small body relaxing as she took in his words. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy for her, but he was determined to help her find her place, to make sure she felt seen for all her unique gifts. Amara, ever the observer, had her own struggles, though they were quieter, almost invisible to those who didn't look closely. She worried about everyone, constantly checking in on her sisters, sensing their moods before they could even speak. She began absorbing their fears and insecurities as her own, trying to fix problems that were too big for her to carry. Ethan noticed her retreating into herself, her quiet nature becoming even more reserved as she tried to keep the peace. One Saturday afternoon, as Ethan sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset, Amara joined him, her small figure casting a shadow across the worn wooden boards. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, until Ethan noticed the worried frown on her face. "What's on your mind, Amara?" he asked softly, knowing she needed space to share. Amara sighed, tucking her knees up to her chest. "Dad, I just want everyone to be happy. I hate it when Jasmine gets upset or when Faith is sad. I want to make everything better, but I don't know how." Ethan pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Amara, you have the biggest heart, and it's one of the things I love most about you. But you can't fix everyone's problems. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there for them, just like you're doing now." She rested her head on his shoulder, her worries easing a bit. Ethan knew that Amara, with her kind heart and gentle spirit, would grow up to be a source of strength for her sisters, a steady light in their lives. But he also knew he had to teach her to take care of herself, to balance her empathy with boundaries. Then there was Leela, whose boundless energy and curiosity often got her into trouble. At just 7, she was fearless, always testing boundaries, pushing limits, and diving headfirst into whatever caught her interest. Ethan loved her adventurous spirit, but he couldn't help worrying about her relentless pursuit of the unknown. One day, as he was cooking dinner, he heard a crash from the backyard. Rushing outside, he found Lila standing beside the remains of a makeshift ladder she built out of planks and bricks, her face dusted with dirt, and her knee scraped raw. "Leela, what on earth were you thinking?" Ethan said, his tone more exasperated than he intended. She looked up at him, her eyes wide but unafraid. "I wanted to see if I could climb to the top of the tree, Dad. I almost made it." Ethan knelt down, examining her knee with a sigh. "Sweetheart, you have to be careful. Not everything can be climbed or conquered. Sometimes, you need to think before you act." Leela looked down, her lip trembling. But then she met his gaze, defiant and unyielding. "But I want to try everything, Dad. I want to know what's out there." Ethan couldn't suppress a smile, despite his worry. "And I'll always be here to catch you. But remember, sometimes it's okay to take things slow. You don't have to climb every tree at once." As he cleaned her scrape and bandaged it, he realized that Leela's spirit was something he cherished, a reminder of the strength and resilience that had carried each of his daughters through their journey. They were growing up fast, each finding her own path, and while it scared him to think of the world waiting beyond their little home, he knew they'd face it head-on. A few weeks later, on a particularly sunny afternoon, the girls decided to hold a family talent show in the backyard. They'd spent the entire morning planning, each one eager to show Ethan what she could do. Faith presented her latest artwork, a mural she painted on an old bedsheet, filled with vibrant colors and dreamlike imagery. Jasmine recited a poem she'd written about family, her words filled with a depth that moved Ethan deeply. Amara sang a song, her voice soft but clear, and Leela attempted a daring acrobatic routine, complete with a teda final. As he clapped and cheered for each of them, Ethan felt a surge of pride so strong it brought tears to his eyes. His daughters were growing, discovering their strengths, and finding ways to shine despite the challenges they faced. They'd built a life together, one filled with resilience, love, and the strength to face whatever lay ahead. After the talent show, as the sun set and they all sat around a small bonfire in the backyard, Ethan looked at each of them, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They'd created something beautiful, a family born not of blood, but of choice, of heart, and of the courage to be vulnerable and brave in a world that didn't always understand them. Jasmine looked over at him, her eyes soft in the firelight. "Dad, thank you for choosing us," she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. Ethan reached over, squeezing her hand. "Thank you for choosing me. You girls are my greatest adventure, my family. I'm so proud of each of you, more than you'll ever know." And as they sat together under the stars, Wrapped in blankets and each other's company, Ethan felt a deep peace settle over him. No matter what came their way, they would face it together. Because they weren't just surviving anymore. They were truly living, growing, and thriving as a family. Strength through new challenges. As the years passed, the once cozy house on the corner had grown into a hive of adolescent energy and dreams. Ethan marveled at how quickly his girls were growing up, each of them carving out her own unique identity, her own voice. While he knew the teenage years would bring their own set of trials, he also felt ready to face them. After all, they had already been through so much together. Jasmine, now 15, had become a young woman with a quiet strength and unyielding determination. She excelled in school, particularly in science and math, and had her sights set on a future in medicine. Often, she'd come home from school with a fire in her eyes, her mind filled with new ideas and ambitions. She'd speak of her dreams of becoming a doctor, her voice steady and unwavering. But Jasmine's passion and drive were not without their own difficulties. She faced constant reminders that people saw her differently, sometimes in ways that were hurtful, other times in ways that made her feel like she had to prove herself. One afternoon, she came home from school visibly upset, her shoulders hunched and her usual confidence absent. Ethan was preparing dinner when she entered the kitchen, her eyes downcast. "Hey, Jasmine," he said, setting down the spoon. "What's going on?" She hesitated, then sighed. "I had a talk with my guidance counselor today." Ethan waited, giving her space to open up. "She told me maybe I should consider more realistic career goals." Jasmine continued, her voice tight. "She said medicine is competitive, and that maybe I should think about something else, something less ambitious." Her eyes flashed with anger, but he could see the hurt beneath it. "I know I can do it, Dad. Why don't they see that?" Ethan's heart ached for her, but he felt a surge of pride as well. His daughter was fierce, determined to break past any barriers placed in her path. "Jasmine," he said, looking directly into her eyes, "you have every right to dream as big as you want. You don't have to limit yourself for anyone's comfort. You're capable of anything you set your mind to." Her face softened, but he could still see the uncertainty. "But what if I'm not enough? What if they're right?" Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "You are more than enough. And I'll be right here with you every step of the way. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't do something. You've got strength and heart, Jasmine, and that's more than enough to go as far as you want to." In that moment, Ethan knew Jasmine would face countless challenges in her pursuit of her dreams, but he also knew she had the resilience and grit to overcome them. Her path wouldn't be easy, but he would support her, cheering her on through every hurdle. While Jasmine focused on her future, Faith, now 14, was finding her voice in other ways. Her art had grown more intricate and expressive, each piece reflecting her evolving identity and perspective. She'd filled the house with her paintings, drawings, and murals, transforming their home into a gallery of color and emotion. Her favorite subject remained their family, and Ethan couldn't help but feel touched each time he saw the way she captured their lives together. But Faith's artistic sensitivity also made her more vulnerable to the harshness of the world. She often internalized the negativity around her, struggling to shake off the hurtful comments and judgments she encountered. One evening, as Ethan was helping her with an art project for school, she looked up from her canvas, her face etched with sadness. "Dad, sometimes I feel like people see me as just different," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like they don't understand me or why I want to spend my life drawing. They think it's silly that I'm wasting my time." Ethan set down his paintbrush, looking at her with a gentle smile. "Faith, art is powerful. It can change people's hearts, open their minds, and make the world more beautiful. Don't let anyone make you feel small because of your gift." Faith's expression softened, a spark of hope reigniting in her eyes. "But what if they never understand?" Ethan pulled her into a hug, his voice filled with quiet determination. "You don't have to be understood by everyone. Faith, What matters is that you stay true to who you are. You have something special, something that can make people see the world in a new way. Hold on to that. The world needs more people like you. Amara, now 13, was becoming a quiet pillar of strength in her own right. Though she still observed more than she spoke, she had a knack for understanding others in ways that amazed Ethan. She would often sit with him, discussing everything from books to people's behaviors, her questions thoughtful and wise beyond her years. One evening, Amara approached Ethan with a look of concern. "Dad, do you think it's wrong that I always want to help people? Sometimes I feel like I care too much, and it hurts when I can't fix things." Ethan smiled, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "Amara, your empathy is a gift. It's what makes you who you are. But remember, it's okay to take care of yourself too. You don't have to carry everyone's burdens alone." Amara leaned into him, her small arms wrapping around his shoulders. "I just want everyone to be okay," she whispered. Ethan held her close, his heart swelling with love and pride. "I know, sweetheart, but you're enough just as you are, and you don't have to solve everything. Sometimes just being there for someone is all they need, and I'm always here for you too." And then there was Leela, his youngest, who was turning 12 but still possessed the same adventurous spirit she'd had as a little girl. She had joined a school soccer team, and her passion for the sport was undeniable. She was quick, daring, and unafraid to take on any challenge. But her fierce spirit often led her into conflict with authority figures, especially her coach. One afternoon, Leela stormed into the house, her face flushed and her brows furrowed. "Dad," Coach said, "I'm too aggressive on the field. He told me I need to calm down, but I'm just playing as hard as I can. Why should I have to hold back?" Ethan chuckled, ruffling her hair as she sat beside him. "Leela, there's nothing wrong with giving it your all. But sometimes people mistake passion for aggression. Maybe try to channel that energy into working with your teammates instead of against them. Show them that your strength can make everyone better." Leela pouted, clearly not convinced. But after a moment, she sighed, her fierce expression softening. "Fine, but I'm still going to be the fastest one on the field." Ethan laughed, giving her a high five. "That's my girl." Through these challenges, Ethan continued to marvel at his daughter's resilience, their ability to face each obstacle with courage. But he knew that, despite their strength, the world wouldn't always be kind to them. He could see the subtle ways they faced discrimination, the moments when they were treated as other by people who didn't understand or refused to try. One day during a school event, Ethan witnessed an exchange that struck him deeply. A parent, noticing Ethan with his daughters, muttered to a friend, "How does he manage? Raising 4 black girls alone. It must be exhausting." Ethan clenched his jaw, feeling anger rise within him. He wanted to respond, to make them see the beauty and strength of his family. But he knew that arguing wouldn't change minds. Instead, he looked at his daughters, standing proud and unshaken, and felt a surge of pride that outshone any judgment. That evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, Jasmine spoke up. "Dad, do you ever feel like we have to work harder just to prove ourselves?" Ethan met her gaze, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "Maybe we do, Jasmine. But remember, we're not here to please anyone. We're here to be true to ourselves, to live our lives with integrity and strength. Let people say what they will. We know who we are." The girls nodded, a fierce sense of determination settling over them. They were learning not just from him, but from each other, growing stronger together. And as the night fell, filling their small home with the quiet hum of love and resilience, Ethan knew that they were becoming more than just a family. They were a force, a testament to the power of chosen bonds and the beauty of facing life's challenges together. They had overcome so much, each of them with their own story, their own strength. And as they continued to grow, Ethan knew they would carry that strength with them into every challenge and every triumph that lay ahead. Unbreakable bonds. As the years passed, Ethan watched his daughters grow into extraordinary young women, each navigating the world with a fierce independence and strength that filled him with pride. Their journey together had been a challenging one, but their bond had only deepened, unbreakable and unyielding, even as life continued to test them. Jasmine, now 17, was in her final year of high school, and her dreams of becoming a doctor were closer than ever. She had worked tirelessly, staying late at school for extra tutoring sessions, spending weekends volunteering at a local clinic, and keeping up her grades with a focus that was almost awe-inspiring. Her efforts had earned her a scholarship to a prestigious pre-med program, something she'd been dreaming of for years. But as the acceptance letters began arriving, she faced a new challenge, one that would test her resilience in a way she hadn't anticipated. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Jasmine hesitated, her eyes flickering with a hint of worry. She glanced at Ethan, then at her sisters, before finally speaking up. "Dad," she began, her voice hesitant, "I got accepted into Boston University, with a full scholarship." She smiled, her pride evident, but there was something more, an unspoken concern beneath her excitement. The room erupted into cheers, her sisters shouting congratulations, each of them brimming with excitement. But as they quieted down, Ethan saw the worry in Jasmine's eyes. He knew her well enough to see that something was troubling her. "Jasmine, what's on your mind?" he asked gently. She took a deep breath. "It's just, Boston is so far away. And what if I don't fit in there? I've worked so hard to get here, but now that it's real, I'm scared." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Jasmine, it's okay to be scared. Change is hard, and you're stepping into a new world. But you've already faced so much, and you've proven that you can handle anything. Trust yourself. You've earned this." Jasmine nodded, her face softening, and he could see the relief in her eyes. But her sisters weren't so ready to let her go without expressing their own anxieties. Faith, in particular, looked visibly upset, her fingers nervously twisting her napkin. "Jazzy, I don't want you to go," Faith said quietly. "It won't be the same here without you." Jasmine reached out, taking Faith's hand. "I know, but I'll still be here, just a phone call away. And you're going to come visit me, all of you. I promise." Their words were filled with the bittersweet reality of growing up, of moving on to new chapters, and as Ethan watched his daughters navigate this moment, he felt a mix of pride and sadness. They had all grown so close, leaning on each other through life's challenges, and he knew that Jasmine's departure would be hard on all of them. But he also knew that they would find a way to stay connected, that the love they shared would bridge any distance. As Jasmine prepared to leave for college that fall, the entire family pitched in, helping her pack, gathering last-minute supplies, and filling her new dorm room with reminders of home. Ethan and the girls drove her to Boston, spending the day exploring the campus and taking pictures. When it was finally time to say goodbye, they all shared a long, tearful hug, each of them feeling the weight of Jasmine's departure. "Remember, I'm just a call away," Ethan said, his voice choked with emotion as he hugged her tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Jasmine. You're going to change lives." Jasmine smiled, her eyes misty. "I learned from the best." As they drove home, the car felt emptier, the absence of Jasmine's voice leaving a quiet that was both strange and deeply felt. Faith, Amara, and Leela each had their own way of coping, their emotions mixed between pride and loss. Faith poured herself into her art, using painting as an outlet to process her feelings. Amara found solace in books, often reading to Ethan in the evenings as a way of connecting. And Leela, still her adventurous self, joined the school soccer team, filling her days with practices and games. Life went on, and the seasons changed, each one bringing its own challenges and moments of growth. Faith, now 16, had blossomed into a talented artist, her work earning recognition both at school and in local art shows. She was shy about her accomplishments, but Ethan encouraged her, attending every show, praising each piece with a pride that left her blushing but grateful. One evening, as they sat together in her makeshift art studio in the garage, Faith hesitated, her brush poised over a canvas. "Dad," she said softly, "do you really think I can make it as an artist?" Ethan looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. "Faith, you have a gift. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not enough. You see the world in a way that most people can't, and you have the courage to share that vision. That's powerful." Faith nodded, a small smile breaking through her uncertainty. "Thank you, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you." Amara, meanwhile, had grown into a compassionate and empathetic young woman, her natural sensitivity guiding her toward a desire to help others. She often spent her weekends volunteering at the community center, tutoring younger children, and offering her support to anyone who needed it. Her quiet strength and kindness were evident in everything she did, and Ethan knew that, like Jasmine, she was destined to make a difference. But Amara, too, faced her own struggles. She often carried the weight of others' emotions, and there were times when the burden seemed too much for her. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Amara confided in Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, sometimes I feel like I care too much. I don't know how to turn it off," she said, her eyes filled with worry. "It's like I'm carrying everyone else's pain, and I don't know how to let it go." Ethan took her hand, his heart aching for her. "Amara, you have such a beautiful heart, and it's okay to feel deeply. But remember, it's also okay to set boundaries. You don't have to carry everyone's burdens alone." Amara nodded, her gaze softening. "I'll try, Dad. I just want to make a difference." "And you will," Ethan said gently. "But take care of yourself, too. You're just as important as anyone else." Leela, on the other hand, continued to fill their days with laughter and energy. Her love for soccer had only grown, and she was now one of the top players on her school's team. Her fierce determination and competitive spirit were matched only by her loyalty to her family, and she often reminded Ethan of the adventurous little girl she'd once been. One weekend, Leela invited the entire family to her championship game, urging them to come cheer her on. Ethan, Faith, and Amara sat in the bleachers, waving homemade signs and shouting encouragement as Leela sprinted across the field, her focus and intensity a testament to her dedication. When her team won the game, Leela ran to them, her face flushed with excitement, and threw herself into Ethan's arms. "We did it, Dad," she shouted, her voice filled with joy. Ethan hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of her happiness and pride. "I'm so proud of you, Leela. You're unstoppable." As they drove home, the girls chatted excitedly, recounting the highlights of the game and planning their next family outing. In those moments, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude, a deep appreciation for the journey they had shared. Each of his daughters had faced their own challenges, and each had grown stronger because of it. Over time, Jasmine began visiting more frequently, bringing stories of her college experiences and sharing her new insights with her sisters. She'd grown more confident, her passion for medicine ignited by her studies and the challenges she encountered. Ethan watched with pride as his once cautious daughter blossomed into a young woman with a clear sense of purpose. And as they gathered around the dinner table one evening, sharing stories and laughter, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. They had come so far, each of them growing in ways he could never have anticipated. Their family, built on love and resilience, had weathered every storm, proving that the bonds they shared were unbreakable. Jasmine raised her glass, a soft smile on her face. "To family," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "No matter where we go, no matter what happens, we'll always have each other." The others raised their glasses, echoing her words with their own cheers and laughter. And as Ethan looked around at his daughters, he knew that they had created something extraordinary. They had faced the world's challenges, overcome prejudice and hardship, and grown stronger because of it. They were more than just a family. They were a force, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and unbreakable bonds. Ethan's heart swelled with pride, knowing that they would carry this strength with them, wherever life took them. Together, they had built something beautiful, a family born of choice, love, and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. And as they sat there, bathed in the warm glow of the evening light, Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They were his daughters, his family, his greatest adventure. And no matter what challenges the future held, he knew they would face them together, bound by a love that was as enduring as it was unbreakable.